Well, I mean, I think words don't describe the grief and the anger felt by our city. This was an appalling act of terror where innocent Londoners and visitors were enjoying a night out in London Bridge and Borough Market and were deliberately targeted by these cowardly terrorists. And what we saw last night was not simply an act of terror in London, but also the heroics of our emergency services and the police responding swiftly, tackling the terrorists, tending to the injured. And as a consequence of our police and emergency services, far fewer people died than unfortunately have died, and far fewer people were injured as severely as they have been. As it is, though, I can confirm 7 people have died. 48 people are in hospitals across London. Some of them are critical with life-threatening conditions. At the moment, as I speak, some are in theatre. So I'm sure I speak for all of London and the country when I say our thoughts are with the families and friends of all those affected by the horrific attack last night.
You attended the Cobra meeting this morning with government ministers. What did you learn about the investigation into the attackers?
Well, there's two key focuses. One is the investigation. One is making sure we're as safe as we possibly can be. And I know the media are already reporting on some raids of properties this morning. As you'll appreciate, there's only so much I can divulge, but the police and the security services are following a number of lines of inquiry. The threat level remains at severe, which basically means the threat of an attack is highly likely. It's been that level for a while now. We should all be vigilant, but also be calm. If there's anything at all suspicious we see, please report it to the authorities. The second important part of the Cobra meeting was to make sure we're doing everything we possibly can to keep our city and those who visit our city safe. Londoners will see, as will visitors, an increased police presence today and over the next few days. That will include increased uniformed officers, that will include increased armed officers, but also other officers who are in plain clothes as well, making sure we're as safe as we possibly can be.
The Prime Minister, in her long statement outside Downing Street, said that as a result of this there needed to be several things. The first was there was too much tolerance of extremism in this country. Do you agree with her words, particularly in relation to Islamist extremism?
We've got to make sure that we have a zero tolerance towards anybody who's thinking about committing acts of violence in our country, anybody propagating messages of hatred, but also making sure our youngsters and people know the true Islam, giving our youngsters the resilience to reject the nihilistic, perverse ideology that these terrorists clearly had. And we've seen in our country and in London in particular over the last few months acts of violence, acts of terror perpetrated by people who follow a perverse, poisonous ideology. And what's important is not to allow these terrorists to fuel division, to divide our communities, but for us to come together to find ways to defeat terrorism.
Do you agree with the Prime Minister that this is happening on the internet and that's where it needs to be tackled by greater use of regulation?
Well, what we've seen is a new phenomenon in recent years where people can be groomed, can be indoctrinated in their bedrooms via the internet. We've seen in the recent past preachers of hate being able to preach their vile on the internet and people being able to watch that freely. We've managed to stop preachers physically preaching these things in halls and in places across the country. What's happening though is they're finding other ways to get their vile and their poison into young people's minds. We've got to make sure we work with the internet service providers, work with the social media companies to firstly not host these messages of hate, but also to make sure when they're notified about them, they take them down as soon as possible.
Do you retain confidence in the Prevent counter-terror strategy?
Look, I'm on record in the past expressing my concern about the imperfections of Prevent. I do think there's a role for a counter-extreme model. I do think there's a role for us to make sure we work with communities to prevent young people being radicalised. I think there are improvements that can be made to Prevent, and I'm working with the government and others to make sure we can improve as much as we can all the policies we have to prevent young people being radicalised. And clearly there are imperfections, which is why you're seeing people born and raised in this country, ostensibly integrated, doing these horrific acts of violence.
Final question. Theresa May has said enough is enough. should and will Londoners' lives change because of what happened last night?
What I'd say to Londoners, we've seen, not just in the recent past, but over previous decades, acts of terror in our city. We're a stoic bunch. As Londoners, we aren't going to allow terrorists to change our way of life. We're going to carry on mingling and mixing on a Saturday night in London Bridge and Borough Market and elsewhere. We're going to go to the polls this Thursday and vote. We're not going to allow these terrorists to disrupt our general election. The way to change governments and our leaders is through the ballot box. Look, what do these terrorists want? They want to destroy our way of life. They want to change the way we live. They want us to cower. We're not going to let them win, and we're not going to be cowed by terrorism.